Hello there, everyone. How are you today? Just camera right. Okay. Morning. My name's Colin. Welcome back. If you've been here before, hello for the first time. If indeed you are here for the first time. And hello to everyone who's on YouTube as well. Hello. A lot of familiar names. Nice to see you all. We're about to get started with this OET Writing Live Class from E2 Language. The speciality, of course, is medicine. If you are not a doctor, don't worry. The principles of writing remain the same. So if you are a nurse or a physio or whatever, fill your boots. Okay? You have much to learn and it's applicable here as it is anywhere else. So before we get into the writing, let me tell you a few things that we've got going on. First is that we have an offer which we're inviting our students to participate in, E2 World. All you have to do is produce a short 20-second video saying who you are, where you're from, and how E2 language makes you feel more connected, and submit your video there to the promo URL on the screen, and in return, we'll give you a $10 voucher. Can't say fairer than that. So think about doing that if you don't mind. At E2 Language, we offer a writing service for our students. That means that if you are interested, and I'm sure you will be, what you can do is go to the platform, find the case notes, do the task, and submit it. Within a day or two, it will come back to you with a comprehensive score report and feedback from a real, experienced E2 language teacher. I think you get. I mean, it's good. Everyone really gets a kick out of it, and it's useful when you're studying on your own. It's nice to know how you're actually getting on. The other thing which is great is a one-to-one tutorial. They're done on Zoom, as pretty much everything is done on Zoom nowadays. But we were doing it on Zoom long ago. But it's great. 45 minutes. You can't hear properly, Syed. Can anyone else not hear properly? Or is that just a problem that Syed's having wherever Syed may be? I find that sometimes it might be my problem. Many times it's not. Almost every day, somebody says that they're having a problem. Can you choose the teacher? You can't choose the teacher, but if you do a booking and then you see it on the booking, the name of the teacher, and you don't want that teacher, cancel the booking and try again. I will often see people booking, the same person booking many times and cancelling until they get the teacher that they want, because the system is random. Sometimes people want a class, they book, they see the teacher is Colin, and then they cancel. It's fine, it's understandable, but that's your right as a customer. But specifically to go in and say, I want this teacher, I'm afraid we don't yet have that feature. So anyway, one-to-one tutorial, 45 minutes, one or two areas of the test. If you're going to do writing, do make sure that you've submitted a piece of writing into the platform. Sweet as a nut. Just hold on 1 second. Great. Mock test. Before we go on, we have a mock test. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a 2-hour simulation of the OET done entirely through computer with a one speaking role play done on Zoom, and it's brilliant. If you've never done the test before, if you're thinking about doing the test, you're about to go and do the test maybe for the first time, or repeating the test, hopefully for the last time, do the mock test, find out where you're at, and get a good idea of your capabilities. So in today's class, you're going to test your English with a quiz. We'll learn a method for completing the writing task. We'll analyze that task, choose the relevant case notes, plan out your writing. We'll write the start of the letter today and focus specifically in the time that we've got on the secondary issue paragraphs. Syed says my voice is still not clear. Does anyone else have a problem hearing my voice? Please tell me in the chat box if my voice is not clear. I'm afraid others can hear my voice clearly, Syed. I think, Syed, it's an issue at your end. Let me send Sign a message. And yeah. And also, just a word to anyone who is in Australia or who's thinking of moving to Australia, just be aware that the broadband in this country is rubbish. Anyway, there you go. Got that out of the way. That's a non-political statement. It's nothing to do with any political party. Broadband here is not great. So, that being the case, we're only focusing on the secondary issue paragraph. We will look at a model letter and we'll check out the criteria before doing one more quiz. So, have a pen and paper handy, such as you would have on the day of the test. And we're going to do a quiz in a moment, but let's first review the verb tenses in English. There are 12 that we use, 12 verb tenses. Look, we use them all, definitely, but it's the top 5 which we use most commonly. Present simple. Mr. Lin urgently requires your expert assistance. The present continuous. Ms. Adams is currently receiving. Present perfect. Miss Smith has been treated with cold compression therapy. Present perfect continuous. Mrs. Tran has been undertaking. In the past simple, Mr. Jones was admitted to St. Andrews 2 weeks after his operation. Interesting, we say Miss Smith. It's a title we almost never use anymore, but there you go, Miss Smith. Cool. So now we're going to do a quiz. The task will appear on the screen. You have 60 seconds to choose the correct tenses and complete these sentences. Just a reminder, if you don't mind, keep your answers and comments in the chat box if you're on Zoom. Okay, thanks. And thanks for everyone who confirmed that they can hear my voice clearly. Thanks, everyone. Your answers. Thank you. All right, excellent. So let's have a look then. The nurse admitted that she had never seen such an aggressive case of shingles in someone so young. Number 2, for the first time, we have been forced to reschedule the date of his operation. Oh, sorry, not for the first time, my apologies. Number 3, we underestimated how much of an impact the antiretrovirals would have on her autoimmune system. And number 4, could you put your shoulders here, lift your arms above your head, and then be sure to lie still until I finish the scan? There you have it. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. Right, so let's take an overview of the writing. The writing test requires you to read and analyze the task, to read and analyze case notes, and then to write a letter of referral, of discharge, or transfer. It's only one of those 3. There are no others. In the past, there were more. That is no longer the case. There are only those. So if you've somehow come across some other form of letter, a letter to inform, for example, I'm afraid that's not a thing. Okay, referral, discharge, or transfer. At E2 Language, we have it's a 10-week cycle of classes, and we do cover all 3. There is genuinely there are more examples of referral letters because you are more likely to have a referral letter than the other 2, transfer or discharge, but we cover them all. Anyway, in the reading section of the 45 minutes, you've got to read the task, work out who you're writing the letter to and what action they need to take. You need to read the case notes to understand the key facts about the patient's condition, And then you need to identify relevant information, and you will decide if the information is either highly relevant or even quite relevant. If you decide it's relevant at all, it will go in your letter. Another person is saying, is there a chance of making my voice better? I have to be honest, I've asked people already about the quality of voice that they're hearing at their end, and people are saying for them it's okay, which means that the stuff coming out of my mouth should be clear enough because I'm using a microphone. Sorry about that. I know that sometimes the internet is the problem. I know that often Zoom is a problem, but I think that it seems that the problem is probably further down the line, not here. Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, it's your decision. In the reading comprehension time, the first 5 minutes, you will make a decision about what's relevant and what's not relevant. Okay, it's as simple as that. If you can justify it, if you can say to yourself, the recipient of this letter needs to know this information in order to do their job, then it goes in. Fair enough. In the writing time of 40 minutes, you need to plan out 3, 4, or 5 short paragraphs. That should only take about maybe 5 minutes, and then you're going to spend half an hour to 35 minutes writing carefully. Every paragraph will have an overriding idea, and it's there between the introductory sentence and the request that your 180 to 200 words counts. So in that 5 minutes of reading time, you need to analyze the task to work out who you're writing the letter to, what action that person needs to take, what key information they need, and what prior knowledge they have of the patient. You will then go to the case notes and work out what is relevant, what's repeated and also relevant, and what's not relevant at all. To emphasize, anyone who does not know the difference between relevant and repeated and relevant is they are both relevant. It's just that you may know that you may see in the notes multiple times the relevant information about the patient's pre-existing condition or comorbidity or marital status, whatever it is, that is repeated. It's relevant, but it's repeated. So I'm going to distinguish that. Okay, somebody's asked what tense we will need in today's paragraph. Let's find out. It doesn't really work that way. So it's not like paragraph 1 is this tense, paragraph 2 is that tense. There's a mixture of tenses throughout. Sweet. There's the task. Please answer these 4 questions. Who am I writing to? What action do I want them to take? What does the reader need to know? And what does the reader already know? You have a minute to answer those questions. Brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for your observations. Let's have a look. Who am I writing to? Gynecologist, Dr. Angela Melrose. She of perhaps of Melrose Place. What action do I want the reader to take? Further investigation and definitive diagnosis. What does the reader need to know? Gynecological history, current situation and condition. And what does the reader already know? The answer is no prior knowledge. That is very commonly the case, but not always. Don't take it for granted that the person has no prior knowledge. Okay. Now you're going to look at the case notes and decide what is relevant, what's repeated and relevant, and what's not relevant at all. It is worth noting a couple of things. First, when I do it, and when you see my case notes organized, I generally use red on the screen here for relevant, blue for repeated and relevant, and I just leave in black what is not relevant. How does that relate to the criteria, you may want to know? Well, to get top marks for content, you need to make sure that key information is included and nothing important is left out. And to get top marks for conciseness and clarity, you need to make sure that you're not including irrelevant information. Okay, your criteria, your call, you're writing to the gynecologist. So here are the case notes. You have 5 minutes. I will leave you unmolested and uninterrupted. Good luck. Thanks, everyone. You don't need to share your observations. I know it's tricky, of course, because on the day of the test, well, actually, it'd be interesting to see how it works with the new test. But on the day of the test, in a traditional pen and paper test, you can actually make your notes on the page, so it's slightly different here. Now, I'm going to show you my notes, and of course, invariably, some people say, why did you include this and why didn't you include that? Well, let's have a look, see what I've got first, okay? But thank you for your observations. In red. Patient's name and date of birth. A couple of people have said, oh, I've seen this before. Yeah, we have a 10-week cycle at E2 language. So if you've been here for 11 weeks, you'll have seen this before. Lots of the discussion, lots of the OE, and lots of the management plan. A lot. And let's see, though, then what's in blue. A smattering hither and thither, the rest of the management plan, the rest of the discussion, and a little bit about the past history. Okay. You may at this point want to take a screen, which is fine. And you may also want to ask me, why did you include this? Why didn't you include that? That's also fine. You can ask those questions. But remember, it's your determination. I'm writing to the gynecologist. What does she need to know to get her job done? Just a note for you, Zita. As I said, we have a 10-week cycle. So if you've seen this before, it means you've been around for a long time. Why isn't smoking and alcohol important? Let me ask the group. Why do you think I did not include smoking and alcohol? Yeah, okay, not relevant, but also because the alcohol unit, 2 units a week, less than 2 units a week, so little, and she doesn't smoke. If she did smoke and the alcohol was of a maybe a relevant quantity, I might include it. I just think it's not enough. Yeah, insignificant. All right then, I hope you've had a chance to take the screenshot. Let's move on. Now, somebody's also asked, well, what do I do with the repeated information? I will show you. Either I aggregate the repeated information, or, and you may see this in different letters, it comes up in more than one instance within the letter, because that's how the flow of information requires it. I don't know if there's an example in this letter. Let's have a look, see how we go. But sometimes we need to be aware so that we don't say, I don't know, in every single paragraph, repeat the same relevant information. That's all. Let's have a look, see how we deal with it. Cool. So, 40 minutes of writing time. It's this moment that I take to remind you all to be flexible about the way that you approach this letter. It's not the same as other English tests. You're given a task which is quite unique in the English language testing world, where you take case notes, interpret them, and then write a letter. 10 strong candidates can write 10 different letters and each get an A. All right, that's what I'm trying to say. Be flexible about it. Don't have a template in mind. It's got to be like this. That kind of orthodoxy will not help your cause. Today, our focus is on the secondary issue. We'll get there soon because we first have to talk about addressing the recipient when you plan and write. There's an outline for that. We need to talk about taking notes and planning. The determination of how many paragraphs there'll be is entirely up to you. The content of each paragraph is entirely up to you. And then when you write, you need to continually check the relevance and importance of what you're doing, making sure that you leave a few minutes at the end to check your work. Okay, so the outline of the letter is as follows. The title and full name of the recipient is at the top, their job title, and then their full address. After that, you write the date. Which date, you ask? Well, the date of the test will do. After that, you put the reference line, the patient's title, Mr. Mrs. Ms, their full name, and their age or their date of birth, doesn't matter which. And then dear Dr. Mr. Mrs. Ms, and their surname, their family name. You then write your letter, And at the end, you write yours sincerely if you know the name, yours faithfully if you don't, and then you write doctor. That will do. Can I write my name? Yes, write your name. It doesn't matter. All the information that you need to do this is in the task. It's now on the left-hand side of the screen. Take a minute and a half, please, to write the letter outline. Lovely. Thank you very much for your observations. Let's see. Okay. Dr. Angela Melrose, gynecologist, Portsmouth Hospital, Portsmouth, 030119. If you put 2019, I would be very happy. Dear Dr. Melrose, re Mrs. Helen Fielding, date of birth 15/11/81. Then write the letter, yours sincerely, and then doctor. A few observations. If you put the date at the top of the letter above Angela Melrose or below the word Portsmouth, it doesn't matter. If you put the reference line, re Mrs. Helen Fielding, above the salutation, dear Dr. Melrose, or below it, that doesn't matter either. And if you were to write yours faithfully, even though you know the name of the recipient of this letter, instead of yours sincerely, it doesn't matter either. Just know that there is a structure you're expected to be following pretty much, because the most important thing about this letter is the guts, the 180 to 200 words that goes in the middle between the introduction and the request. Okay, so you need to plan and check the case notes to decide how many paragraphs will go into your letter, what information will go into each of those paragraphs. Today, our only concern is the secondary issue. Slightly different pattern, doesn't matter, don't worry. Saeda, don't worry. This is extremely minor. Which one you're comfortable with, follow the one you're comfortable with. Okay? You will not pass or fail on the fact that you put the date above or below. Do you understand? Or after yours sincerely you wrote the wrong. Do you understand? This is just know what should be there pretty much. Cool. Secondary issue is our concern today. What does that mean? The main issue's been covered. What are the other issues to cover? So now you're going to spend 90 seconds with the case notes once again, and you're going to find material that you think we should be including. My voice is annoyingly resonant. Well, there's very little I can do about my highly resonant voice, my dear, but I will do my best to not resonate. Main issues being covered. What are the other issues to cover? Have a look. 90 seconds. Make your choices. Okay, here we go. This is what I've got for the planning notes. Secondary issue, the discussion uses pads and tampons 6 to 7 days, frequent changing, nil intermenstrual or postcoital bleeding, passing large clots, iron management plan, iron supplement, and stop aspirin intake. Somebody asked previously why I hadn't included the aspirin. I did. There you go, there's the aspirin. Nice. A couple of questions I got there. If the patient's under 18, do you need to put in salutation? We're not writing the letter to the patient, so the salutation's to the doctor anyway, for example. So, yeah. There's another question. No, I don't think so. All right, then. Okay, my friends. So, language that you might want to use to write the secondary issue paragraph, things like which require, typically, has been advised for this reason, and replace. There are the secondary issue case notes on the left-hand side, the useful language above it. You now have 5 minutes to write your secondary issue paragraph. How is what secondary issue, Noor? Remember, secondary issue, additional things that we need to be addressing. Okay, I shall now quiet my resonant voice. I will see you in 5 minutes. Thank you very much for those of you who shared. Somebody's asked a good question, actually. What's my feeling about the passive voice or the active voice in the letter? We actually do address this in one of the live classes. I'm afraid I can't remember which one. My feeling about active and passive is you should use what you consider to be appropriate. If you think naming the agent, as it were, the person doing the action is important, you should do that. I think for good manners, on the whole, in the introduction and then the request, we are active. I would be grateful, for example, is an active form. And in the middle of the letter, Mr. Smith was admitted. Mr. Smith has been diagnosed. Mr. Smith has been tested. When it's not important who wrote or who did the action, the agent, then maybe passive voice is more appropriate. But it's not a rule. Again, that's a decision that you can make. If it's a proper noun, any proper noun should have a capital letter. Okay, so that's for you to decide. As far as if you know that it's a proper noun, give it a capital letter. If you're not sure, don't worry. Okay, yeah, first letter, exactly. So hydroxychloroquine, is that a proper noun or is that a generic? So on the whole, I believe that nowadays in the OET, they're quite keen that all of the case notes involve generics. But, if you see there's a proper noun, then proper noun gets. So Panadol, for example, is a proper noun, isn't it? Let's have a look then. Mrs. Fielding's menstruation typically lasts 6 to 7 days, and she uses both tampons and sanitary pads, which require frequent changing. Although she has not experienced any intermenstrual or postcoital bleeding, she has passed large clots of blood. For this reason, she has been advised to take Floridix iron supplements to help raise iron levels and replace aspirin with Panadol. Okay, there you go. So there's the whole letter. You may want to take a screenshot. No, Seema, it is not a rule. This active-passive thing is not a rule. I tend to find there's more active in the introduction and request, and there's a bit more passive voice in the middle, but that's not a rule. If you have any questions, let me know. By the way, no, I don't know if anyone is familiar with Helen Fielding. This is a famous name, but there's no reason why you should know who Helen Fielding is. But if anyone does, let me know. Anyone familiar with Helen Fielding? If it's generic, then it doesn't need a capital letter. I will show the case notes again after, okay? Don't worry, before we finish, I will show you the case notes again. Bridget Jones, Ada, well done. Did you look that up? Be honest. Did you look that up? Helen Fielding wrote Bridget Jones' diary. Oh, well done, Ada. Well, I'm sorry for doubting you. Shame on me. Right. Let's have a look then. The criteria. Language specifically, and we're talking today about cohesive devices and your dominance of these to show your command of grammar and your ability to use these accurately is important for assisting in the overall meaning of the letter that you're producing. So you may want to take a screenshot of this. Conjunctions. We use conjunctions to join our ideas together. They include the famous fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so, but also a bunch of other things. Perhaps for today, most importantly, the relative pronouns, which, who, when, that, whom, whose, and so on. An example of that is Dr. Smith, comma, who has been practicing for over 40 years, comma, is both up to date and open to some of the more radical therapies. It's nice for you to show your linguistic flexibility, let's say. So there we've got a non-defining relative clause, who has been practicing for over 40 years, and you've got the conjunctions in there, both and. So relative clauses, as we touched on just now, they use relative pronouns, who, which, that, where, whose, and whom. For example, St. Thomas's, which is the biggest hospital in the city, is seriously understaffed. Number 2, Dr. Spivey, whose work on Lyme disease has been widely published, will be giving a talk this evening. Number 3, the accident and emergency department, where our patients are triaged, is in dire need of extra seating. And what I'd like you to do now is to look at these sentences. You've got 5 sentences about Mrs. Hamer, and I'd like you to aggregate them into a single sentence. So look at them all. Mrs. Hamer felt weak. Mrs. Hamer's blood pressure dropped suddenly. Mrs. Hamer sat down. Mrs. Hamer put her head between her legs. Putting her head between her legs made Mrs. Hamer feel better after 15 minutes. Okay? So what we want to be doing is aggregating them so that we've got one sentence. One sentence. Would you like to have a crack at that? So, Mrs. Hamer is the subject of the sentence. So Mrs. Hamer, who was suffering from weakness as a result of sudden onset low blood pressure, So there's my non-defining relative clause. Okay, I've added that information. We call it non-defining because it is extra. It is extra information about the person here involved. All right. So about Mrs. Hamer. Mrs. Hamer, who was suffering from weakness as a result of sudden onset low blood pressure, remedied the problem by sitting with her head between her legs for 15 minutes, and then she felt better. So that's an example of the use of cohesive devices. Thank you very much, Mohammed. That's nicely done. And some nice observations. Well done, Fatima, Ada, nicely done. Remember, one sentence is what we're aiming for, though. I know it looks tricky, but it's possible to take quite a lot, to aggregate a lot of information and use cohesive devices to make one coherent sentence. That being the case, here's your real task, 2 minutes. You've got 3 little groups of sentences, one about PTSD, one about heartburn, and one about Mary's rash. 2 minutes, please, to make those into single sentences. Seema, thanks for your message. Yeah, and thank you everyone for sharing your I'll be happy to come to England to teach you as soon as England's safe enough to travel to. Thank you everyone for your efforts. Nicely done. Let's see. PTSD, which is prevalent among ex-servicemen, should be treated with medication and therapy. Number 2 is heartburn, which was worse after meals containing wheat, was alleviated with OTC medication. And number 3, Mary's rash, which got itchy every time she went swimming, was very painful. Sweet. Let me quickly go back to the case notes because a few people said, oh, I want to see the case notes. Let me go back to those. There you go. Case notes, if you've not yet, because we've pretty much got to the end of what we're doing today. All that remains for me to make a couple of recommendations for things you can do to improve your overall performance in the writing. There are the case notes. Okay, screenshot, I think taken by now. And let's just, again, have a look at the completed letter. There's the completed letter. It's quite interesting. Notice the introduction is generally quite brief. Thank you for accepting Mrs. Fielding as your patient for further investigation and diagnosis of possible fibroids. And the request is quite brief as well. Look, it would be appreciated if you can attend to Mrs. Fielding's immediate requirements as well as arranging ongoing care. Okay. So in this letter in particular, you've got more substantial intervening paragraphs. Okay, main issue, secondary issue, and course of action effectively. As far as treatment is concerned, if you are an E2 language student, then you do get to sign up to the live classes. Yes, they're pretty good. Notice Ada, we're aiming for a single sentence, okay, when we do these sentences. All right, just a couple of things to tell you before we finish. Check out our platform. If you are an E2 language subscriber, you can join us for the live classes. It means you get a Zoom link and you sign up to the live classes that you want to join up to, which is great. Keep up to date with all of the latest news on the OET from the official OET website, occupationalenglishTest.org. And they've also got some interesting tips there as well. I just realized my camera's been off all the time about that, so you can see my happy face as well. Podcasts for your listening is definitely something you should be doing on a regular basis. Health-related podcasts from credible sources, ABC. Okay, I'll tell you that. ABC in Australia, BBC in Britain, NPR in the US, and CBC in Canada are all good sources. How can you understand the mistakes that you've done in the letters that you write? By analysing. What you have to do on a regular basis is analyse your work according to the criteria of the test. Okay, something that you should be doing on a regular basis. So look for your grammar mistakes, spelling, and so on. Recorded classes, again, if you're an E2 language student, you can log in and click the recorded classes button on the left-hand side of the dashboard. The classes stay up for 2 weeks after they've been recorded. Also, for further reading, don't forget about Science Daily, which is great. Definitely worth doing. And yeah, look, that's kind of it really. Don't forget that we've got the offer where you get yourself a discount if you write us a short video about how E2 language makes you feel more connected. $10 off for a 20-second video. Seems like a good swap for me. And don't forget the mini mock tests, which is another thing that you can do to practice your test taking skills before you actually do the test. You are my student, that's true. But when we're talking about the volume of students that we've got, as far as interacting with us is concerned and understanding mistakes, the best thing you can do is a one-to-one tutorial, because that means that we can actually spend time with you looking at things that you've produced and then critically analyze your work. That's the first thing. The second thing you can do is submit work through the platform for feedback, which we also do, which I think is very useful, because when you're working on your own and you're studying away, you don't quite know how you're progressing. Then having actual feedback via an OET expert is very worthwhile. They would be the two most logical things to do if you wanted actually to go over your mistakes, go over your work with another person. That's what we offer from here. But as far as understanding where your mistakes are, how your work needs to be improved, I would strongly recommend familiarity with the criteria and then analyzing your work against the criteria. Have I included everything relevant in this lesson? Have I left out anything that is important? Okay, and then you reflect and you study and you look at your work against the work of something, maybe a standard, well-written letter, and say, how am I doing this well? How am I doing this poorly? You need to compare and draw your conclusions. That's what I would say. Okay. All right. Well done, everyone who knew who Helen Fielding is. Of course, this is not actually her. Helen Fielding, he was born in 1981. And I can pretty much guarantee that the actual Helen Fielding is not that young. And thank you very much for your questions. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. I'll be back next week with writing. No, not writing, reading. Reading, Monday morning my time. I guess that's Sunday evening for a lot of you who are in Europe and elsewhere. And I will be again happy to have your company. Enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck, everyone.